Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today's lesson that we have for you is another review lesson, things that you should probably already know a little bit about, and we're going to be reviewing clauses. Now, in our next couple of lessons, we're going to expand on this, and we're going to start going from clauses to simple sentences, to compound sentences, complex sentences. So it's going to be more complicated as we go forward in the following weeks. But for now, what you need to remember is, what is a clause? And so let's kind of start with the basics and move down, okay? Because we have words, phrases, clauses, and then we have sentences. And in clauses, we have independent clauses and dependent clauses. And so you need to know how you start from a word and just keep making it bigger and bigger until you get into a sentence. So let's start with a word. So what is a word? Well, we already reviewed the different kinds of words that we have, and the four basic words that we have are nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. So we have our shapes here: nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. And you may have heard these words before, but maybe not have a lesson on it yet. But we've had prepositions as well as conjunctions. And so these are just words. They're just one word, one group of letters that form words. But then you go from words into phrases. So what is a phrase? Instead of just having one word, what you're doing is you're having a group of words. Think of a word as a group of letters. I could have put letters here to start, so that's your A, B, C, D. But they go from letters to words, and you make it a little bit bigger each step. So what is a phrase? A phrase is not one word. A phrase is a group of words that go together. And what do? They go together, but they are missing a subject or a verb. Now, here's the difference. Yes, you have the noun shape here, so it's not an object noun. We're talking about a subject noun. So the group of words that miss a subject noun or a verb. It has one, it doesn't have the other. If you have a phrasal verb, that is a phrase, so it usually starts with a verb and ends with a preposition. Now that is a group of words, but it doesn't have a, what? Subject noun. Remember, it can have one, but not the other. A lot of the phrases that you see are actually missing a verb. A lot of the phrases have a subject noun, but they do not have a verb, okay? And so we're going to show some examples of this in a little bit. So word, a little bit bigger, phrase. So a group of words missing a subject or verb. What is a clause? A little bit bigger than a phrase. Instead of missing a subject or a verb, it has both a subject noun and a verb. So it's still a group of words. It's just, instead of missing something, here, since I don't have one of these, to go from a phrase to a clause, whatever is missing, just add it, and then you make it into a clause. Does that make sense? Each step, you're just adding something new to it to make it a little bit bigger. So what is a clause? Again, group of words, has everything, subject and verb. It can be a complete thought. That's why it's not always, but it can be. Because with our clauses, we have two different kinds of clauses that you should be aware of. The first one that I want you to know is the independent clause. An independent clause, it is a complete thought because it has a subject, noun, and a verb. However, it's not a sentence. That's the key. Just because you have a subject and a verb, it could be a sentence if you added two things. You need to have a capitalization at the beginning and a punctuation mark at the end. If you have those with a clause, you turn the clause into a sentence, and we'll get into that in another lesson. But right now, just remember, an independent clause is a complete thought, still not a sentence, because what's it missing? You need to add that to get to the next level. It's missing the capitalization and the punctuation. What is a dependent clause? Now, a dependent clause is still a clause because it has a subject and a verb, but it's not a complete thought. Remember, clauses can be, if they are independent, they can be a complete thought. If they are dependent, they have all the parts, but not a complete thought. Why? Over here we have DCM. This is a dependent clause marker. Sometimes in front of your clause you'll have a word. And this word changes the meaning of the clause because instead of like finishing the idea, the complete thought, it's actually leaving some kind of a question open. So if I said when plus a clause, or though, since, unless, these are some very common dependent clause markers. If you have this in front of your clause, the sentence is not complete. The thought is not complete. I need more information. And so an independent clause stands alone. It's complete thought, it's fine. An dependent clause, it's missing some extra information that I need to make it into a complete thought. That might sound a little bit confusing just with our definitions, but I'm going to put some examples up to show you, starting from a word, growing it from a word to a phrase, to a clause, to an independent clause, and then making it a dependent clause. And so you'll see that, and hopefully that will make things a little bit clearer. So let's look at some examples. Okay, so here are some examples that I want to show you, but it's actually really just taking one word and growing it, changing it from a word to a phrase, to a clause, to an independent clause, and then to a dependent clause. And I think this will make things a little bit clearer. So let's start again. We have a word. Words are just groups of letters that go together and they form a word. So nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, conjunctions, prepositions. So this, students, noun, not a subject or object yet, but it is just a noun. Phrase. Remember, what is a phrase? A phrase is a group of words missing either a subject noun or a verb. So in this phrase, instead of just students, I have the students. I could stop there. This is a phrase because I have a subject noun, but I do not have a verb. I have an adjective, an article, right? So the students at IQ. Still, it's longer, but what am I still missing? It's missing either a subject or a verb. I have a subject. I don't have a verb. I have at IQ. I have at, a preposition. IQ is a noun, but not the subject noun because at IQ is a prepositional phrase. And so this is an object of preposition. And we had this lesson not too long ago. Okay, so here actually I have two phrases. I have the students and I have at IQ. So it's a prepositional phrase with, right, this phrase as well. So it's longer, still missing a verb. Now from a phrase to a clause, remember, instead of missing a verb or missing a subject, it has both. So since this has a subject, I need to add a verb to turn it into a clause. So saying, the students at IQ, what's my verb? Are great. So here, are is the be verb, and then great is an adjective describing my students. So here I have a complete thought. The students at IQ are great. Looks like a sentence. When I say it, it sounds like a sentence, but when you're writing it, not a sentence. Why is it not a sentence? Because I need the capitalization at the beginning, capital T, and some kind of punctuation mark at the end. I could put a period, I could put an exclamation mark. But here, just lowercase and no punctuation. This is an independent clause because it is a complete thought, it is a group of words, it does have a subject and a verb. Now, if I want to turn this into a dependent clause, it kind of seems a little bit like going backwards because I have a complete thought, and then I add a word, and I turn that into an incomplete thought. That sounds strange, but that's what a dependent clause is. A dependent clause is just an independent clause with a dependent clause marker, an extra word at the beginning that makes me want to know more for it to make sense. So for example, I have the students at IQ are great. I'm going to take out the prepositional phrase and just say the students are great. That's still an independent clause, subject, verb. But here, the students are great, independent clause, but if I add the word since the students are great, I added a DCM, my thought's not complete though. Since the students are great, blah. What extra information do I need? And in our next video, we're going to be talking about compound sentences and complex sentences, and then you will learn there how to turn a dependent clause and add an independent clause and turn that into a longer sentence. But for right now, just remember, going from a word to a phrase is missing either a subject or a verb. A clause could be independent or dependent. Independent just means that it has all the parts. It has a subject and a verb. Dependent clause has a subject and a verb, but there's an extra word, a dependent clause marker, which makes it not a complete thought. So with all of that, let's review. One more thing. Before we review, one more thing. Just so you know, clauses, because we were using this one example, it was getting longer and longer and longer. I don't want you to think that just because it's longer, it makes it from a word to a phrase to a clause. You can have very short clauses. You can have 2-word clauses, because a clause, remember, group of words, subject and verb. You could have a 2-word clause. Instead of saying the students at IQ are great, I could just say, students study. I have a subject, I have a verb, it's 2 words. This is a sentence. Why? Capital S and a punctuation at the end. But if I had a lowercase s and no punctuation, right, this would just be a really short independent clause. How would I make this a dependent clause? I could add a word. I'll use when. When students study. 3 words, short, dependent clause. Remember, it's not about how long your groups of words are, it's about the pieces that are missing. Okay, for real this time, let's review. Clauses review. What is a phrase? A phrase is a group of words that go together to form one idea. It is missing either a subject noun or a verb. What is a clause? A clause is a group of words that go together and includes at least one subject noun and one verb. What are the 2 types of clauses? The 2 types of clauses are independent clause and dependent clause. What is the difference between the 2 types of clauses? Independent clauses can form complete thoughts. They can stand alone. Dependent clauses cannot. They need more information or the help of another independent clause. How can one change an independent clause into a dependent clause? An independent clause can be changed into a dependent clause by adding a dependent clause marker to the beginning of the independent clause. What are some common dependent clause markers mentioned in the video? When, unless, since, though. What is important to remember when building up from words to phrases to clauses to sentences? It is not the number of words that builds the next step, but having all the right pieces, parts of speech, in place.